say that you're ready, Ron? Okay. Can you hear me? Good evening and welcome to the February 2nd board workshop. Mr. Gooding, can you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Pickle Antonio?
Here.
Mrs. Mooring? Here. Mrs. Coates?
Here.
Mrs. Horn? Here. Mr. Manley?
Here.
And if you'll all stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Are there any recommended changes to the agenda tonight? No. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda as presented? Thanks, Mrs. Horn. Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Manley. Any discussion? Mr. Gooding, can you call the roll?
Mrs. Mooring? Yes. Mrs. Coates?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Manley?
Yes.
Mrs. Pickle Antonio?
Yes.
Motion carried.
So this is our very first meeting in this format, but I think it's going to just go great. I don't think we're going to have any bumps at all. We are on the section of tonight's agenda that is director reports and discussions, and it looks like we are going to start with a report out from the business office. So Mr. Lofton?
Good evening. So just want to talk a little bit about what the business office does and all the great things that we're able to do out of the business office. The staff members that we have consist of custodians, maintenance staff, food service, and transportation. Just a couple things to throw out there. Food service roughly serves close to 5,000 students a day, whether it's breakfast or whether it's lunch. And they do just such a wonderful job for us to make sure students have the nutrition that they need and they're getting good meals, every day. And then transportation, we all know the challenges we run into with transportation. And, we transport roughly on any given day 6,000 students, throughout the city and to surrounding areas. So it's just a great opportunity, a story that for us that says great things every day about what a great district we have. With that, I want to talk a little bit about construction, and I'll briefly go through some of the highlights that where we're at. Elementary schools, we've started using the academic wings and the gymnasiums. We're close to start using the other spaces soon, but they're coming along and they're continuing to get those finer points done, as anytime you have construction, you run into little things here and there, a leak, different things, and they're fine tuning that right now, which is great. Blacklick Athletics has ran into a little bit of a bump. If you know, January we had roughly 18 to 20 days of rain or snow, and I have a pair of boots in the back of my car you can take a look at. I was out there yesterday, and they're just full of mud. So it's really difficult right now, but hopefully with the ground freezing, we're going to move forward, and we're getting some things done. Scoreboard supports were going up today. We're getting some roofs on the softball field, on the building, and then also on the dugout. So it's moving. Middle School East will start here soon, probably in the next 2 months. We'll start moving dirt, and then we have some egress things we have to work out, because once construction starts, some of the egress, normal egress, will not be available to us. So we're going to do that over spring break. High school stadium is moving along. As you can see, they're moving dirt on a regular basis, putting in foundations. I know the Musco lighting showed up this week, so we'll start seeing the lighting poles go up, and then shortly followed by that, we'll have the grandstands going up. So exciting times. And then the high school, right? You know, they're moving dirt. The pad is ready for us to start putting in foundations, and we hope to have that soon. We're working with the city to make sure they have everything they need to be ready for us to start doing that work. So that's all I have for tonight. Any questions?
It's more of a comment. Sharon Cummings shared with me the moving of the one-room schoolhouse. It was so interesting to see basically a robotic moving system transporting a 1800s building, right? I mean, she and I were commiserating about that, but I think she felt like it was done with a high level of skill and comfort, and so that's pretty exciting.
It was amazing to watch that happen, and, you know, to lift the whole building up at once and to walk it over was pretty awesome. So, okay.
Scott, thank you for the update. Real quick question, on the Black Lick Athletic Complex, any concern with the delay to spring sports based on that bump, or too early to tell?
No, we're looking at having everything done March 1st, and we're still on track. It just, you'd rather have it done early. You know, we'd rather have it done middle of February instead of March 1st, but I think we're going to pour concrete to the walkway up to the softball area. We won't finish putting in the asphalt for the tennis courts until April, when the asphalt plants open up. So as long as we have somewhat of a normal next month, I think we'll be in good shape. Fencing is up. The backstops fencing will be done here in about a week. So it's coming along. It's just kind of, wish it would have been done a little bit early, right? You know, that's all. Being early is not a bad thing, right? So, sure.
Can I also add just a reminder, the original plan was to play tennis on our existing courts this school year. And so, you know, if things sooner, then it would be great if we could utilize those courts this year, but that was not the plan.
Thanks.
Horn has a question.
That's all right.
Sorry, Scott. So for transportation, one of the things that I was curious about, and you said 6,000 students, have we seen a decline in the percentage of students riding the bus?
No.
Like over the last few years? Because it seems like, just because I've been out traveling around, there seems like there's always a backlog of cars, especially at the elementary schools, which surprised me. I know for the high school and like some of the middle schools, so as it speaks to like the construction that's going to be going on at East, in the high school, and if we've already seen a decline in the number of kids riding the bus, what the potential is for just more backlog of cars in the construction areas?
We haven't seen that. You
Okay.
know, I think when you look at the elementaries, it's usually the K1, 2, when they're real little, that parents like to take them and make sure they get there, and, you know, and then after a couple of years, the bus becomes a little bit more comfortable for them to understand riding the bus. But we really haven't seen a major decline in bus riders.
Thank you.
Sure.
If we could follow up with exploring what kind of data we can grab on student ridership from some trend data for the past several years as we continue to talk about traffic and parking, I would appreciate
Sure.
that. Thanks.
I guess in addition to that data, I'm I know that we transport to non-district schools that are within, I don't remember what the radius is.
30 minutes.
Okay, so I guess I would be curious to see if there's been any change in that data as well. So when we look at it,
Sure.
to see that whole big picture, I think would be helpful.
Yeah. And I think, with all the building we have going on, parking around here is going to be difficult. Just had a meeting with Chief Cowser from the Mifflin Fire Department to discuss options of some of their properties that we potentially could use. So we're looking at it every day to try to figure it out, because it's only going to get worse until the new school is built and the old one is torn down. So we have a fight ahead of us, right? It's going to be tough. We're going to have to work with everybody to try to get this done.
Any other questions from board members? Okay, thanks, Mr. Lofton.
Thanks.
Now we are going to move on to communications. Mr. Starkey.
Good evening, members of the board. Happy to be here for our first workshop meeting. For this first workshop meeting, I wanted to just set the stage. Communications department encompasses a lot of things, and you see them daily, weekly, but I just wanted to give high-level wave tops of what our communications department does. I'll start with one of the most apparent, and that's social media. Everybody uses it, knows about it, monitors it minutely, possibly. So when it comes to social media, we know that Facebook is our bread and butter. That's where our community is. That's where they expect us to be. So we will continue to be on Facebook. We see that our Instagram is growing. That's a lot of where our younger community is. Our younger parents are more on Instagram than they are on Facebook. And so that's something that we are looking into. How can we further advance our Instagram presence in terms of reels, stories? How can we use short form videos to again meet our community members, our younger parents, where they prefer to get their information? When we think of social media, sort of our guiding light is we're data driven. We aren't reactionary. We move with purpose on social media. But that being said, social media isn't our number one communication tool. It's just one of the most obvious because everybody sees it every day on their phones. But we never treat it as the first stop for a community to get information. That's either our website or emails for information that you need to know. So that takes me to website. As I'm talking about the website tonight, I know it will change in the coming months. Our current website provider is retiring, and so we have looked into new content management systems for our website, and we just decided on Final Site, which is a national company. They have school districts from across the country that use them, and so we are confident that they can support us and deliver a website that we're happy with. It's also an exciting time for us as a department because we can build a website from the ground up. It's going to be a lot of work, but it's also going to be a lot of fun. We're going to be looking at this from a parent lens of starting with the easy things of what do I need quick? What's the first thing I need when I come to a website? Is it lunch menu? Is it forms? Is it bus routes? What are those things that people need on a daily basis? And sort of build out from there. So it's an exciting time for us. Again, we're going to use data for that. We're going to look at our analytics for our current site, see what people are going to frequently, how long people are staying on pages, and use that information to build our site. So more to come on websites for sure. The other piece that's sort of our number one communication tool where we send information is our newsletters. And so, as you know, those come out on Fridays. And we take great care in what we send in those newsletters. What messages do we have to share? What celebrations do we have to share? And just what information do we need out in our community? And so it's a weekly process. It doesn't start on Friday. When we send it, it starts Monday or sometimes the week before to just plan out what information we're getting out, how can we spread out information and things like that. What amazes me with our newsletter is obviously every parent in our district gets those newsletters, but we have community members signing up. We average 3 to 5 community members sign up a week, which is great news for me because in a school district communications, the community member is the hardest for me to reach. Parents I can get to immediately, but if community members are actively seeking our information, that's great news for me. It's more people that we can get whatever we want to share out to. The other piece to our newsletters, and in that same vein of reaching more people in our community, is our printed newsletters. We just had our first one since I've been here in December. It was a mailer on phase 2 and all of the great construction happening around our district that we just heard about. And so, again, a great way for us to be able to get information in the hands of everyone in our community, whether they have a student in our district or not. And so we're looking at opportunities and how can we expand that moving forward and get more information out there to our community. Videos is sort of the fourth bucket, I'll say, of us providing information. We know that videos, whether social media or long form videos, are a great way to tell our story. A lot of people prefer to watch a minute-long video than to read 5 paragraphs of text. It's a lot easier to watch or listen to a video while you're doing the dishes or making dinner than it is to hold your phone or read on a laptop some email message. And so we're continually looking at ways that we can creatively use video, tell our story, just share what our district has to share through video as a different lens instead of long-form text in an email or a social media post. Those videos do go on social media, but we like to have them all originate from our YouTube channel. So those are sort of the 4 us communicating buckets is kind of how I would term it. Then in terms of us making communications is our events bucket. So our department handles several events, the first of which starts next week, or is next week, with our community coffees, with our superintendent and board members joining. And so it's great to put those on for two-way communication. Again, that's a piece that in my world isn't the easiest to get, so we have to come up with ways to foster that two-way communication instead of just one-way communication. So we have coffees. Later this month, we're already into February. Later this month is the Gahanna Jefferson Education Foundation Gala, and that's an exciting time to see all the support that comes from our community for our students and our staff. We also have our State of the Schools this spring that we are starting to plan. I think this is the first time I'm publicly saying it, April 13th at 7 at the high school. We're excited to be able to just share what our district is about. A night to just learn about Gahanna Jefferson Public Schools for anyone in our community to attend. So definitely more information to come on that. And then another event that we certainly have our hands in, and it seems a little weird talking about it in February, but is our convocation. As many of you know, that's our back to school sort of pep rally to get our staff excited to welcome our students back. And so we're already starting to plan it. We're already looking at options. As it's a yearly event, we want to make it exciting and fun and fresh every year. That's our goal every year. We don't want it to be a convocation that people feel obligated to come to. We want them to be excited to welcome each other back so they can welcome students back a couple days later. The next three buckets are sort of behind the scenes, not necessarily having finished products. So branding and marketing. I've talked several times at board meetings about our branding. Where we are in the process, our steering committee is looking to whittle down to 3 or 4 logos we're happy to take to our focus groups, and then we'll take those logos to our focus groups over the next couple months and really fine-tune what we want our logos to look like. That being said, we know that branding is more than just a lion, some colors, and some fonts. We know that the brand is what people think of and see and associate with the district. And so we work with any department who will reach out to us, and sometimes we reach out to them. Any public-facing materials, we love to have a hand in to make sure that it matches our brand. It represents the district. When Judy and I were putting together talking points, she said, it is our job to protect the brand and make it shine. And to me, that's branding in a nutshell. And that's what our department, how we view that. The other two things are tied very closely together. One is media relations and the other is emergency communications. Media relations, we are either sharing stories with media outlets, wanting them to come to different events or highlight different things we have going on in the district. The flip side to that is they often come to us with interview requests or questions, so we're helping the media with anything they may need. That ties into emergency communications. Obviously, this is the most unpredictable part of a communication person's world. I can't predict when we're going to need to send communications other than a Friday update. I can't predict anything else. And so what that looks like is just diagnosing what may be going on, working with district leadership, building leadership, just to see, does communication need to go out? Who does it need to go out to? In what order? And then it's just a matter of, if communication does need to go out, we work together, put together communications, run it through the channels, obviously in a timely manner because it's an emergency communication. And so then we get that out to the parents or staff or whoever may be involved in that situation. So those are sort of the 8 buckets we identified. I know it was a lot of information. So it was social media, website, newsletters, videos, events, branding, media relations, and emergency communications. So the plan is, at each of these workshops, I'll dive deep into each one of these over the next several months so that we can really dive in and look at our social media numbers or talk about how we used our data to drive what our website may look like. So this was just wave tops. We'll definitely dive in further. Are there any questions I can answer now, or things you definitely want me to cover once I get to a section?
Well, first of all, I keep hearing great things about the Phase 2 newsletter that went out. So again, great job. And this might be something for a future one, but I would be curious to know how many community members are signed up for the weekly newsletter.
For sure, we can definitely get that number.
Thank you.
2 questions. The first one, I think, is related to branding and marketing. Once a new logo has been determined, do you think that is the goal to ever get to a point where I can't remember what the right terminology is, but where the district has colors, logo, that
A
gets
branding
set?
guide?
Thank you.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So we're working with DLR for our logos, and that's it's their deliverable to us, is that branding guide.
Okay.
With our logos, different variations, different typefaces that we can use, in different ways we can alter it and still be within our brand. So yes, we will have a brand guide.
And that'll be available, I assume, to everybody in the district for when
Yes,
they
it's-
create their own communication pieces.
Yes, and it's something we will definitely celebrate because it's the new brand moving forward.
Okay, thanks. The second question that I had, was related to the website. I know that you said that you were planning to use data in building the new website. Are you at all thinking about doing focus groups, or is that too much when you're building a new website? So you'll use the data from where people go on the website currently. Do you plan to do any in-person dialogue with community members?
It's something we're talking about. We just chose a website company yesterday.
Yeah.
So it's something we're talking about. We'll see where we land on that.
Yeah.
But certainly you'll hear more about website as we are building it. And I think that there will be just overall feedback and thoughts on what people want to see in a website.
Is the goal that a new website be built at the start of next school year? Is that the timing?
Thank you for reminding me. I
Okay.
had it in here, glossed over it. The goal is to launch it around July.
Okay.
Because not many people go to a school district's website in July.
Sure.
And so that allows us to almost do a soft launch, to launch it and then be able to work out some kinks and bugs that we may discover before we hit that August onslaught of people visiting our website.
Okay, you just prompted one more question, and then I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Mooring. So, okay, I have a build on mine too. Sorry, we might have opened a whole can, but I will give it to the other board members too. But is the idea with building the website that you will look? So we have the main website, but then we have, for example, the athletic department has a different website and the theater boosters have a different website. Is the goal to look at all of that holistically, or you don't know yet because you haven't started down the path?
Correct. And I think that first priority is our current site will be going away. And so our first priority is to get everything off of that in a usable website before we lose that information. And so I think once we get past that point, then we can look at how can we expand. One thing that I'm excited about for the new website is there will be more of a focus on our building websites as well, to where now if I want information about my elementary school, it'll be easier to find, more readily available. So that's one thing that I'm excited about, to be able to build that out. So I know that's not exactly your question,
that's
but
fine.
that's something we're definitely looking to
Yep.
build out as we launch our site, to be able to help families find the information they need faster.
Okay. I'm going to go to Mrs. Mooring first, and then Mrs. Coates, and then maybe Mrs. Horn. Okay, we'll go to Mrs. Mooring first.
My question was going to be very similar to hers, but maybe I was gearing it more towards the origination part. On your steering committee, do you have people from athletics and the performing arts so that they're learning the whole process instead of being presented?
In
"This
terms
is
of
our
branding?
brand"? Yes.
Yes, so on our steering committee, we have representation from each of our buildings, or not each of our buildings, sorry, each of our levels. So we have representation from the high school, middle schools, and elementary. And so where we tie in a lot of our athletics and theater will be our focus groups. And so we have 5 identified focus groups that will be instrumental in really providing boots on the ground feedback. The steering committee will sort of set the framework, and then those focus groups are really where we're going to dive in and start to tweak and make it truly our logo.
I believe you will invite board members to participate in each one of
Yes, correct.
And when does the old or the current one sunset?
They said summer, but we can keep it as long as we need it, in terms of they aren't going to hard cut us, but we also don't want to be paying for 2 sites at the same time,
Right.
or for as short of a time as possible, I should say.
And then I'd be interested in the company you went with, and you might not know this yet, just having gone through this in a previous life, user testing was very, you can do like a fake site of user testing so that people can really experiment as to like what some of the navigation features speak to most.
And I went through this in a previous district
Oh,
as
good,
well.
good.
And so it was with a different company that was actually just acquired by the company that we just went with. And so we had a sandbox that we sort of tested. It was a great place to just send links and say, tell me what you think. Because websites are very subjective. What I like may be different than what you like. I may like a hamburger menu. Some people like drop-down menus. And so it's, we're not going to please every single individual, and we know that. But we definitely want consensus and feedback to be able to provide the website for our community that meets the needs of as many people as possible.
One thing I would add to that is training, especially at the building level. I know when we were all running for school board and we were going out to the individual school sites to find information, and when we went to the schools for different areas, some of them had no idea what was on their pages. I mean, and I would say, well, it says this, this, and this, and they're like, we had no idea, so I think that's another part, is how to make it so it's easy for everyone to update and be consistent, with that. But I've had a lot of feedback from people saying, I can't find the information. I'm sure you have as well. So even quick survey, like Survey Monkey or different things on to the parents would be a good indication of, and it's probably going to be different by levels on what are they most interested in seeing.
For sure, and that's something that our Google Analytics data will also help us
Right.
drill down into what people are looking for. To touch on training, something I'm excited about, and again, I'm still learning Final Site as a company, but I believe that they have a lot of online video tutorials, and so that will help. We may train people at the building level, but they can go back and be able to reference and brush up on their website, because oftentimes people in the buildings aren't doing it every day like I am. And Judy and I are on the website every day, in and out. So we understand that people at the building level, hopefully that would be a great resource for them to to be able to get their website maintained.
Right. Wonderful. Thank you.
That was it. Thank you, Mr. Starkey.
Thank you.
Next, we have Human Resources, Mrs. Reed.
All right. President Picolantonio, members of the board, thank you so much for having me tonight. I'm really excited to be able to share some of the work that we've been doing in the Human Resources Office. Before I get started, I just want to mention that I am certainly not the only one who can take credit for all of this work. We're a small but mighty team in HR, and we all pitch in on all of our initiatives, so I just want to recognize the work of the team as well. The first thing I'd like to talk with you about is one of my most favorite parts of my job, which is certificated hiring. We, as you might know, recently, about a week and a half ago, posted our first round of teacher openings for the 23-24 school year. And I feel like I can't see you. I'm in the mic. So believe it or not, that didn't just happen. That work started almost at the beginning of the school year to get to this point. And you may know a few of the steps that have taken place, but I just wanted to share a few things that we're doing this year. As you know, we typically take the time to meet with individual administrators. We talk about their needs at the building level, within the departments, and kind of give them that one-on-one time to hear about their thoughts about the needs for each of their areas. This year, we added a couple of extra steps to the process. We felt like we needed some more collaboration. We needed some additional open dialogue and clarity around how the staffing process worked. So after we were able to get the information from the individuals, we talked about it at an administrators meeting. So each of the administrators actually shared what their staffing requests were with the whole group. So everyone got a picture of the needs across the district, not just their individual building. So I think that was a really nice process. We also were able to take some time during that meeting to begin to prioritize the needs. Because something that happens every year is that we have more requests than we have money to honor. So that's always a really tricky process. We also connected that to the 5-year forecast. So we educated the team on the 5-year forecast and how that forecast impacts staffing and it ultimately impacts our decisions on what we are and are not able to honor when administrators are making requests of us. So right now we are at the point where we were able to analyze some of those requests, and I think it was January 19th, our administrators meeting, we went back and shared with all of the administrators at the same time what the first round of approvals was going to be. I think that was really an important step for us. In previous years, we sort of communicated individually, and then some people were thinking, well, what am I going to hear, and what's going to happen with my requests? So we're trying to do that in a very methodic and open way with all of our administrators at the same time. So right now, we're at the point where we have analyzed just the needs for certificated staff based on enrollment. And we're still working through some programmatic requests. So principals are aware where we're going to be adding teachers. Unfortunately, we do have to reduce a couple of sections at Goshen Lane. So we're working through that process with the administrator and the teachers. Also, I will put a plug in for our communications department. We've been working together to get some really great flyers together. So I'd love for you to take one of these today. We have a QR code that goes directly to all of our postings, and you are welcome to share that out with the community. I did want to also mention that we've had the postings up for a little over a week, and I've been monitoring them closely every day. And I think the teacher shortage that we've been hearing about the last few years is really going to start to show up this year in our hiring. I looked back, and one of the most popular positions that we have from year to year is our kindergarten openings. We have lots of teachers who are interested in those. Last year, when I posted a kindergarten position around the 1st of February, we had over 100 applicants. We're sitting at about 40 right now. So we're seeing a much slower pace of applications. And again, it's a little bit early. The postings have only been up for a little over a week, so hopefully we'll see an increase there. But I do think we're gonna start to see that decline show up this year. So that's it for certificated hiring. The next thing I'd like to share with you is some of the behind the scenes work that you may have never heard about before. And that's our work with approving continuing contracts for the school year. You actually won't see those on your board agendas until May, but that work actually started last month in January. So the way that that works is any teacher who's up for contract this year, we need to analyze whether or not they might be eligible for a continuing contract. It's a quite cumbersome process. There are lots of ins and outs of what might qualify a teacher, but in general, we look at the type of license or certificate that the teacher holds because it can be different based on when their certificate or license was awarded. We look at the date that the license or certificate was awarded. We have to look at the number of years that that individual has been working in the district. And then we also have to look at the amount of coursework that they've completed after the issuance of their license. So again, lots of little nuances in how we analyze those and determine whether or not they're eligible. We do send out a notice by January 15th to let teachers know if they're up for contract. That they could take a look and see if they think they're eligible and submit their application to HR. Those applications are due to us by March 1st, and we continue to analyze those until we get them on the board agenda in May. So all of that work happens by the time you see them on the agenda, and we are required by law to approve them all by June 1st. So we're working with those deadlines. The last thing I want to talk to you about is sub-fill rates. You've probably never heard that before. Hopefully you haven't heard it as much this year as you might have heard in past years. I have a little bit of good news. We've been looking and analyzing our fill rates for this year, and our certificated fill rates are the highest that they've been in at least the last 4 years, which is a huge accomplishment. I will tell you, I brought a little bit of data for you. So this year, this is just for certificated staff members, our fill rate for this year is 95% so far. So that's huge. Last year, it was 84%. That's by the end of the year. The prior year, it was 90%. The year prior to that, it was 95, but I will tell you that number is skewed because we didn't have subs from the middle of March until June. That was the year COVID hit. So we kind of have to throw that number out. And then in 18-19, our fill rate was at 92%. So one of the strategies that we've used to ensure that we do have substitutes in our classroom is to employ building substitutes. Those building substitutes are teachers who commit to working in our district as a substitute every single day. This year we have 40 building substitutes, which is amazing. They are people who you don't often hear their names. They don't often get the credit that they deserve, but they are the reason that our district is functioning and our classrooms are functioning every day. So I do just want to give a shout out to all of those people who are filling those roles. The other thing that is important to point out is they are typically our most skilled and qualified substitutes that we have in our district, and so often they'll get tapped into to fill long-term absences. So if we have a teacher who's going to be out for maternity leave or an illness and we can't find a substitute, often our building substitutes will be called upon to fill those absences. So the number of subs that we have available fluctuates a little bit from time to time, but they definitely are key to our success on a daily basis in the district. So I just want to thank them for their work. Some not great news relates to our classified substitute fill rates. So I just want to share with you, I just did the fill rates for this year. Again, teachers for this year are 95%. For our secretaries, we have a fill rate of 68%. For our clerk typists, we are at 65%. Cooks are at 71%. Custodians are at 25%. Kitchen helpers are at 25%. And educational aides are at 10%. So that is a huge stressor on our buildings. Our classified staff work so hard and they're so integral to everything that we do on a daily basis that it makes it really tough. I know our custodial staff, our full-time staff are working really hard and they cover all of those absences so that our staff and buildings don't go without that support on a daily basis. So we do in one way or another get those substitute custodians or get our custodians in to substitute. But AIDS is really where we're struggling. It's a tough position to fill. We have raised the rates for classified subs. You all voted for that earlier this year. We have not seen a huge improvement in the small increases that we were able to make in those salaries. But we continue to work and, strive to get those people signed up in our district. We've done a couple of things. Again, social media, we've sent out some signups to try to get people in for interviews. Adam Kunkel, the Human Resources Coordinator, and I were just talking the other day about starting monthly job fairs so that we get people from our local area maybe who just haven't heard about the jobs, don't know what's available, and get the message out a little bit more. So we will certainly continue to work on that. And then just a little plug before I end my report. Have my little pin on because February is American Heart Month, if you are aware. John Grundich, who is a teacher at Chapel Field Elementary, I'm going to get emotional. Oh my gosh. I know. John's retiring this year, and he has been a huge proponent of Go Red for Women. He has a personal story connected to Go Red for Women. And so every year he raises money for the American Heart Association through his Jump Rope for Heart fundraiser. I think the last time I heard he was really close to $100,000. I don't know if he ever made it or not. So lifetime earning of $100,000 in donations. So I know he would really appreciate it if you would wear red tomorrow for the Go Red for Women Day in honor of John. And that's all I have. Any questions?
Thank you, Mrs. Reed. Questions? Mrs. Horn?
I'm interested in the employing the building substitutes. Is there thought, because when did you start implementing that versus just regular substitutes?
That's been going on before my time.
Okay, so it's been a while.
Yeah.
Is there any thought of that based on your numbers and the data for some of these other positions, especially like aides?
So,
knowing if people know that they're guaranteed to be someplace,
yeah.
Every day.
We've
that
offered
that
that,
stability.
yeah. Sorry.
No, that's okay.
We've offered that all year, full-time placements for aides, for substitute aides. The problem is it doesn't come along with any increased salary or benefits, and I think benefits is the kicker.
They
and
wouldn't receive benefits?
They don't. Our building substitutes don't receive benefits, no. They're regular subs that they get a little bit of a bump in their daily rate, but they're all hired through the ESC. And yes, so they function just like a regular sub. So yes, we've had that position posted. We actually have 3 of them.
Okay.
They usually don't last very long as building subs because we do have a bit of turnover in those positions. So typically,
They just
when an
transition.
aide, exactly, as soon as we find one, we have a full-time aide opening, and then they slide into that. So yeah, we've tried that too. I would love to offer them benefits.
Mr. Manley?
So I love that I see the QR code everywhere, and I think that has made it really easy for me. I get job inquiries from people. Usually it is for teaching positions, but it makes it really easy for them to access it is the feedback I've gotten. And I have plugged all the other positions a lot. And, I'm excited to hear about the job fairs. I think that's great to do the outreach because a lot of people, they don't think of the other positions. As far as the feedback I've gotten from talking to people, they're surprised to hear about the other opportunities and positions that are available, especially classified. And so I love the job fair idea. I think there is an interest, and people don't really know the benefits and all the opportunities that are available. So I think that's really good. And doing outreach, I'm pretty sure we'll have the success rates just go up. I love the stats you have about the kindergarten, and I'm curious about, is it similar in other grades or levels of school? Or what's your percentage?
Yeah.
40% or?
It is. I don't know if I have a percentage off the top of my head, but it's definitely across
Or a
the board.
trend.
One of the positions that we have posted right now is family and consumer science at the high school. There are 0 applicants, none. So it is consistent across the board. There are certainly harder to fill positions, such as that family and consumer science. Intervention specialists are really difficult to find right now. Math and science tends to be another one that's difficult to find. So there are certainly positions that have historically been harder to fill and are going to be even harder now. Welcome.
Coates?
Do other school districts offer benefits for their aides? Is that part of the competition? Yeah, the substitutes, yeah.
The substitutes, I'm not sure. It probably depends on how they hire them. Again, if you're hiring them on a part-time basis, the way that we do for substitutes, typically no. I would say they would not offer benefits. When you get to the full-time employment is when the benefits would typically kick in.
And I guess just for clarity, the certificated substitutes, do they get benefits?
They do not.
How about the
So-
long-term substitutes?
So if a substitute is in an assignment for 60 days
Okay.
consecutive in the same assignment, they get bumped up to teacher salary. If they're in a position for 120 days, they become a contracted employee. So at that point, they get benefits. They get to be an internal applicant for job postings and such.
And that's
So
for all kinds of substitutes,
all teacher substitutes.
teacher substitutes.
Yes.
Any other questions? Did you? Okay. Thank you,
you.
Mrs. Reed. Next, we are going to hear from Mrs. I always say, I don't know why I pause when I say it. Yes, Wigging. I know it as it was coming out of my mouth. I'm second guessing
questioning
myself.
yourself?
Yes,
That's
special
okay.
education. Thank you, Mrs. Wigging.
You're very welcome. Thanks, everybody, for having us here this evening. It's exciting to start a new process. So similar to Mr. Starkey, I'm going to just lay some foundation tonight, hoping just to get us all on the same playing field as it relates to special education. So I did share with you this evening a document that is from the Ohio Department of Education and Office for Exceptional Children. It's a guide to parent rights, and it's a guide we give to all of our parents. Every district in Ohio gives to every parent. And it really does set the stage for parents as well to understand the federal and the state guidelines that we are required to operate under and to provide special education services. So as you know, special education is a requirement for us as a school district to provide for any student in our district ages 3 to 21. It's both federally and I heard something behind me. And I'm like, what was that? And it's both a federal and state requirement. So this document that I shared with you outlines a lot of different information, and I thought I'd just share with you a little bit of it tonight so that you have an idea of what we as a district are required to do and what parents and students' rights are as a student under an IEP or under IDEA. We follow what's called the Ohio Operating Standards for the Education of Children with Disabilities. It is the Office of Exceptional Children's model policies, which we adopt here in Gahanna Jefferson Public Schools, that implements IDEA. This guide helps parents, again, understand our obligations as a district as it relates to child find, parental consent, all of the timelines we're required to implement in special education, but it also gives them an idea of what their rights are if they ever have a concern related to the special education services, related to free, appropriate public education that we're providing to students here in Gahanna schools. It gives them an avenue to mediate with us, to work with the State Department and with the district for filing a complaint, for filing mediation, for filing a due process hearing. It gives them all of their rights related to discipline, to unilateral placements in private schools. It is a wealth of information and sometimes very overwhelming. So one of our roles, in addition to just providing this to them annually or whenever we're required to, is to also talk with them through the process. So we have a number of different staff members here in Gahanna that help implement these requirements and help parents understand from the very beginning the process. We help them understand what they could expect during an evaluation, during services, during a reevaluation. And so some of those individuals in our district are intervention specialists, our school psychologists, our case managers, our speech language pathologists. Many times our principals, our school guidance counselors help with that as well. Everyone involved needs to be aware of these, not just those individuals that work in the special education department. Something that's unique about the 2017 release of this parent guide is the fact that it does talk about all of the different ways parents can dispute their concerns with the district. And I thought I would share with you just tonight a little bit about those options that parents have to resolve differences. One of them is called early resolution, where they can bring somebody from the outside of the district, somebody who is impartial, to help us just have a conversation, a facilitated conversation. And that's called facilitation. There's also an option of mediation, where there is a mediator that comes in, assigned by the state and paid for by the state. Usually it's an attorney that is a part of our meetings, and it helps parents just feel heard, maybe when they don't feel the district understands their needs or is listening to their needs. And it really is non-confrontational, it's supposed to be collaborative, and it is an option for parents in our district as well. They also have the right to file a complaint against our district with the Office of Exceptional Children. They have the right to request an impartial due process hearing from the State Department. So they have many avenues. Since this has been released in 2017, the Ohio Department of Education and the Office of Exceptional Children has tracked how many families in the state of Ohio have taken advantage of these different options to them. And in the data that's reported to us during the 2021 school year, facilitation had increased by 15% across the state of Ohio. Mediation had increased by 49%, which is a significant increase in the state of Ohio. Mediation with complaints or due processes being filed increased by 78%. Complaints increased by 92%, and just plain due process increased by 10%. I'm really excited to report, though, in Gahanna we are not seeing any of those trends. In our district, in the same year, we've had actually a decrease. We, in the history of Gahanna, since I've been here, have had one complaint against our district that went to a due process. All of the others have stopped before it got there, and we're really excited to maintain that even though the state is seeing an increase, our district has not. In the year 2021, we did not have any facilitation requests. We had one mediation and one complaint against the district. We had, again, no due process. In 2021, we did increase to 4 facilitated requests that were all favorable outcomes for both the parent and the district. 2 mediation, no complaints, and no due process. And this school year, we've had 3 facilitated requests, no mediation, 1 unsubstantiated complaint, and no due process. So we are continuing to monitor the trends in the state of Ohio, what families are looking for as answers from the district, and hopefully being proactive and working collaboratively with our families. Some of the top violations in the state of Ohio are failure to implement IEPs, not providing free appropriate public education to students with disabilities, not providing prior notice to parents about the actions of the district, errors in evaluation processes, and errors in the perception or the belief about what the parent compared to the district believes they're going to be doing to implement an IEP. There are many things under IDEA and our Ohio operating standards that we must do in special education, but ultimately it should be, and we hope it always will be, a win-win situation for primarily our students, but also our families, and it's a place that we want students and families to have fun, to grow, to love, and I think for the most part our families believe that, and it shows in our data as well. What I'd like to do with feedback from you is talk about each of the things that we implement related to special education services in future meetings, starting next time with our preschool program, our youngest learners, and progress through age 22 in future meetings. What questions can I answer for you this evening about special education?
Mr. Manley, did you have go ahead.
First, yeah, I'm not surprised that the complaints are, rising, and mediation and the facilitation and, statewide. And I'm really impressed that you're educating the parents and putting out, their rights and, the services that they're entitled to. And so you give me confidence in our program, and you have from the start. I just want to comment and say every time I've been to an event, the excitement of all the students being together and participating, and the interaction with the students, with the community at large, is just really so impressive and really uplifting. So I really applaud you for that. And yeah, that just speaks to the successes of the work that you're doing with your team, and really appreciate your professionalism. So thank you.
Coates?
Build on the kudos. I mean, as a parent that had a child on an IEP from like third grade, and now who is a thriving college student, just
Excellent.
kudos to you and your team for developing an amazing program, and it just makes me happy for our district and the students that are going through the program now.
Yeah, thank you.
I guess we haven't had any question. Go, Mr. Manley, did you have a question?
And I just want to also say, building on that, I have a parent who's really excited to move here about our preschool program, and I was talking to them about that, and they're super excited. So,
Great.
again,
Yeah. I will say it's the staff. It is truly the staff in the buildings that make this program great. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Wigging. Let's see, next we have technology, Mr. Blackwell.
So, good evening, President Pickle-Antonio and members of the board. I'm here today with a few brief updates about some of the things we've been working on in the technology department this year. So a lot of our time this year has been spent at Blacklick and High Point getting those new rooms ready for our students and teachers, as well as renovating some of the technology in the old existing parts of the building as well. And some of that includes the network infrastructure at both buildings, and the infrastructure is made up of network switches, wireless access points, and UPS units. The network switches are what provide our wired connectivity to all of our classrooms. The Wi-Fi access points obviously provide the wireless, and the UPS is what provides a little bit of backup battery power to those units for power fluctuations. And that equipment we actually ordered back in March of 2022, and due to supply chain issues, it didn't arrive here until January of 2023. So at Blacklick, their academic wing, opened a lot earlier than High Point's, but we were able to pull together some old equipment off the shelf, some things left over from the old Lincoln Elementary, to get that network up and running for the first day of school. And at this point, we have all the new equipment in there. And we purchased those items ourselves rather than leave them as part of the construction project, because that way we're able to not only negotiate a lower price with our vendor, but also put them through the E-rate, which gets us another 50% discount from the federal government. And we saved just about $36,000 just on the E-rate part of that discount. And of course, all that infrastructure is there to support our classrooms. And we've also had a lot of effort put into putting the new technology in those classrooms out there. We had some challenges at Blacklick because, of course, you have teachers moving from the old section of the building into the new section, as well as from the modulars into those rooms, and some other internal shifts as well. But we were able to schedule around all those and get all the rooms upgraded to the new technology in both the old building and the newly constructed areas. And then more recently, we've been able to do the same at the gym areas of both High Point and Blacklick. But at High Point, we've left the non-renovated rooms, or the non-construction rooms. Their tech will get upgraded this summer. And what is all this classroom technology we installed? So we're trying to upgrade all of our classrooms and establish a standard. All those classrooms got a 75-inch interactive flat panel, which is just a big touchscreen TV on the wall. And those include 2 pens and an eraser, and they have some built-in functionality such as whiteboarding and annotation, so that teachers can annotate over top of whatever video source they might have, whether it's their teacher MacBook or something else. And we also equip those with a Chromebox, which is just a mini computer that goes on the back that allows teachers to use it as its own independent computer. It basically turns that TV on the wall to a giant touchscreen Chromebook-like computer on the wall. So it can be used by them even if they don't bring their computer to school that day, or if there's a substitute in the room. You don't need your laptop to take advantage of that classroom technology. And since that is the familiar Google environment when you log into one of those boards, everybody was pretty quick to learn how to use them because you just bring up your Google Slides and so forth. And YouTube and all the usual online applications work just fine on the board. And then the other piece of equipment we added to the back of those TVs is an Apple TV, which we use solely as a method for teachers to be able to stream content from their teacher MacBook to the TV wirelessly from anywhere within the room. And the other technology we provide in every room is, of course, a classroom phone for those parent calls and those emergencies, a wireless keyboard and mouse so they can use the built-in functions of the TV from anywhere in the room, and also a document camera, which can be used several different ways, either plugged into the TV, plugged into the wireless computer, and that's used to display things on the screen such as books and manipulatives. We chose these items because they're very flexible. Teachers can use them a lot of different ways, whether they want to stand at the board and use a touch screen, utilize the wireless keyboard and mouse on the board, or just stream content from their existing teacher MacBook. And they also work with the Chromebooks that our students and substitutes and aides use as well. And so our plan is to make this the standard setup going forward. And we hope to be able to roll it out to all of the buildings just about the time we're ready to move into the new high school. Because right now we have various different types of systems in different buildings across the district. Some have smart boards, some just have projectors. But hopefully we can get those all standardized by the 2025-26 school year. And I just had a very productive meeting today at Middle School East. We're getting ready to start that same process there. And as Scott mentioned, there's some new fire exits that need to be put in as part of that construction process when we lose access to the north end of the building. And so our first thing to deal with there is that those fire exits are going to be cut right through some of the cabling for the classroom projectors in 2 of those classrooms. So our first part of this project on Middle School East will be to upgrade those 2 classrooms. And again, we hope to use E-rate funds for the network at Middle School East. We currently have the 470 form out there, which is what invites vendors to bid on our request. And of course, we can't have all this new tech in the classrooms without training so that the teachers can take advantage of it. So we were able to work with the principals at High Point and Blacklick to schedule training time for teachers in their regularly scheduled staff meetings. So that worked out really well. And our next steps on training are to go more in-depth on some of those educational software packages and to create videos so that teachers can watch those whenever they want. And another big project we're working on right now is our copier RFP, because our district copier lease is expiring this year. So we're looking into different options, whether we might want to purchase our existing hardware or extend that lease or get all new equipment in. We have, I thought I wrote down exactly how many copiers we had, but I guess I did not. I think we have about 35 of the full-size copiers in the district. And we do a lot of printing. So I hope that we'll be able to find a good continuation that hopefully saves us a little money and keeps meeting our needs. So that's all I had for tonight. If anybody has any questions.
Thanks, Mr. Blackwell. Next, we have an update from our curriculum department from Mrs. Holloman. And Mrs. Schmidt, sorry.
Thank you.
I saw you and it just didn't, thank you, sorry.
Thank you. Good evening, President Pickle Antonio, members of the board. I am pleased to have with me Dr. Aaron Schmidt, who is our English Language Arts Coordinator. Dr. Schmidt is responsible for K-12 literacy programming, but tonight we're just going to focus on K-5. And so we have organized our presentation into 3 different areas: public discourse, research, and Ohio laws and education initiatives, just to give some context to the information we're going to share this evening. Okay. So starting with public discourse, we've spoken about these programs and these phrases that you see on the slide at different presentations that we've had in the past, and I'm sure you've also seen and heard some of them throughout the media and probably a certain podcast. These are things that have been in our literacy program, but much like science and medical fields, the educational practices are ever evolving, and so are we. We are constantly learning and adapting our practices to align with current research and best practices. We continue to study and make shifts in our instructional materials, teaching practices, our assessments, and our interventions, which we'll talk a little bit more about through this presentation. Okay.
Maybe the batteries.
Maybe. So our ultimate goal is aligned to our Equity and Access for All plan, where we are committed to having a comprehensive and proactive literacy program that we are truly meeting the needs of all of our students.
Right. Across state documents, research summaries, and educational resources, various terms are used to talk about the work we do in literacy curriculum, instruction, and assessment. Here we've identified a few terms that are woven into this presentation and need some explanation about how we're using them in Gahanna. Explicit and systematic instruction is a key feature of the research on the teaching of foundational skills such as phonics and spelling. In Ohio, these terms are the part of the plan to raise literacy achievement by addressing the needs of all students. And specifically, explicit and systematic instruction is delineated in Ohio's guidebook. Ohio's Dyslexia Guidebook. This language is rooted in research, as I'll point out a little later. 2 of the terms used in public and academic discourse about literacy are balanced and structured. As we'll discuss, to develop a solid foundation of reading skills and the ability to put those skills to work as a reader, writer, and thinker, students need to experience both approaches. Our teachers, literacy leadership teams, made up of representatives from each elementary, and our instructional coaches are working as cohorts of learners to dig more deeply into our resources and practices and work toward those shifts that Ms. Holloman referenced. Ms. Tia.
So the kids go.
Yeah. Recently, I think we're ready for the next one. Yeah. Recently, our professional learning at the kindergarten through 2nd grade bands has focused on shifting some of our practices in order to more fully integrate the 2 approaches that were on the previous slide. Finding common ground is a way to create a robust and comprehensive program. And as you can notice from that at-a-glance list on the previous slide, some of the characteristics of balanced literacy and structured literacy approaches both have much to offer. So we might want to go back to that slide. And again, that's a very, in a nutshell, list of characteristics of the 2 approaches that we're weaving in. So give you a moment there. And then we'll unpack that a little bit more as we talk further. Now we're ready, Ms. Tia. The importance of literacy can't be overemphasized, and the vast body of research and educational resource development to support teachers of readers and writers is evidence of this key role of literacy in school and society. This graphic represents a landmark research project published in 2000, the work of the National Reading Panel. This panel was put together by the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development and was as directed by Congress. These 5 pillars represent the areas that the panel decided to focus on after a process of public hearings and panel discussions. Those areas were alphabetics, represented in these pillars by phonemic awareness and phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. In educational practice, these 5 areas are discussed as 5 components of reading, and a comprehensive literacy program must support all 5. One of the terms on these pillars that may be a little less familiar is phonemic awareness. Phonemic awareness refers to the ability to hear phonemes, or the smallest unit of sounds. For example, the word dog has 3 phonemes, d, a, g. Phonemic awareness also includes that skill of segmenting, which I just demonstrated, and blending the phonemes back together. And these are both critical precursors of the ability to decode. And we'll talk more about that too. So you're ready. Since the report of the National Reading Panel, literacy research has continued to be reviewed and synthesized in order to impact classroom practice. The 4 recommendations on this slide about teaching reading foundations are from the What Works Clearinghouse and the Institute of Education Sciences, and this report was published in 2016. Together, the 2 documents, the report of the National Reading Panel, the subgroups, that report that I just showed, and then this one, the Foundational Skills Summary, are just 2 examples that represent the vast body of research about literacy, and they indicate the complex work of teaching children to read and write. So I'll give you a moment to look over those. And you can see those were based on research since the panel in 2000, and all of the findings of the previous panel were confirmed, the importance of all of those pillars.
So literacy is the content area that has the highest priority. It is the most researched, and it's also the most hotly debated. It is also the content area that is most governed by state and federal laws, most notably those being the 3rd grade reading guarantee and now the Ohio dyslexia support laws, both of which these laws focus on that early intervention and prevention of those long-term reading difficulties.
To continue our brief focus on state educational initiatives, Ohio's plan to raise literacy achievement is built around a model of reading called the Simple View of Reading, pictured there at the top. This model is a way to organize schools' work with the state standards and the components of reading across grade levels. And an expansion of this model, Scarborough's Reading Rope, is the model we're currently using in our ongoing learning and curriculum refinements. It's not new in Gahanna, as it's been part of Orton-Gillingham training for a number of years. The reading rope can really help us think about what to teach, language comprehension areas, those listed on that top set of strands. And that includes vocabulary, different genre, print concepts, etc., and word recognition areas, including phonics and decoding, which are listed in the bottom. So you can see it comprises, or it really expands on the simple view of reading, but all of the components are still there. In the next few slides, we'll talk more about these areas that are represented in our comprehensive literacy programming, which needs to support each reader in weaving together all of those strands of that reading rope over time. The terms we looked at earlier, structured or explicit and systematic, and balanced, which might refer to practice and application in reading and writing, indicate how we support all parts of that reading rope over time. Foundations, which I know is a familiar program to all of you, is our structured literacy program. It helps us teach students how the English language is structured and to help them develop skills with letters, sounds, word parts, word meaning, grammar, parts of speech, and to connect back to that list of 4 recommendations from the What Works Clearinghouse and the scientific panels. Foundations also helps us to teach academic language. We talk starting in kindergarten about vowels and consonants, and they use the language that helps them understand what they're learning about. So Foundations is one component of our comprehensive literacy program. It's the core instructional resource for K-3 phonics, spelling, and handwriting. And as you can see, it aligns with our state's description of structured literacy. So it has all of those pieces. As indicated in this timeline of implementation and professional learning, we've been working to implement structured literacy with all students over the last 5 years. While foundational reading skills, including phonics, were in our state standards and were incorporated into our instruction, our reading data indicated that an increasing number of students would benefit from a more systematic approach to phonics and spelling, using a more structured resource in our core instruction, so for all students. This is also in line with the current guidance of Ohio's Dyslexia Guidebook. Currently, you'll see that third grade is in their year of study and implementation, so it just got started in third grade this year. Earlier, I also talked about a balanced literacy approach. What we pull from balanced literacy is this framework for interconnected methods for providing literacy experiences in the classroom with various levels of support that I do, we do, you do process that you saw on the slide where we had some bullet points from both structured and balanced literacy. So that gradual release of responsibility. Basically, we use this framework to accomplish three important functions in our literacy curriculum. One, supporting all the components of reading and writing. Two, providing multiple opportunities for repeated practice and different opportunities to support students with engaging and enjoying being a reader and writer. And targeting the strengths and needs of and their interests and passions and the identities of each child. I'm going to start in the upper left and go clockwise. So the blue book, the read aloud with accountable talk. During read aloud time, teachers model the work of being a proficient, fluent, and engaged reader, while they're also teaching students how to talk about books. This is an I do sort of activity, and it helps support the language comprehension part of the rope, building background knowledge, vocabulary, including academic language. Shared reading, the one that's supposed to look like a big smile, shared reading, the mouth, is similar to the read aloud, but the students are all looking at the same text, and they might join in the reading at different times. This is more of a we do, with both modeling and guided practice happening during multiple readings of a book or another sort of text. Next is word study. And it says phonological awareness, vocabulary, phonics would be in that area. And notice that the graphic includes direct reference to foundations. Interactive writing is another we do activity. Teachers and students work together to plan and compose different writing pieces to practice writing process. And this also gives a really good opportunity to focus on spelling, spacing, punctuation, capitalization, those basic skills of composing a sentence. The lines connecting the parts of the diagram are important. For example, we don't want those foundational skills to just live in the foundations time or the word study time. We want to practice applying them in writing and reading with teacher modeling and feedback, which they might do. You see the lines connect to interactive writing and up to shared reading. One final part of this framework is our writing and reading workshops. Like an artist or a craftsperson works in a workshop to really learn from experts how to do something more and more on their own, our readers and writers hone their skills during workshop sessions. It's during reading workshop that we've been involved in this process most of refining our practices. The purpose is to bring more structured literacy characteristics into the work teachers are doing with students during workshop, in small groups or in one-on-one work. Two examples of ways we're working on strengthening the connections between foundational skills and that structure and reading workshop are through the use of decodable texts or books written intentionally to provide decoding practice on the skills that students have mastered in foundations or that they're ready to learn next. So that practice in text, which is one of the recommendations that we saw on that list earlier. And then another one is small group instruction, including small group focusing on phonics during the reading workshop time. The reason that I wanted to really point out the work we're doing with the refining and connections between foundations and other parts of our literacy instruction is that one of the criticisms of early literacy instruction in general is that it doesn't focus enough on the foundational skills in a systematic and explicit way. This graphic is from a state literacy academy that Ms. Holloman and I attended in 2018, seems like a long time ago, when Ohio's plan to raise literacy achievement was in development. As you can see, it lists the 5 components there along the left, in that left-hand column, those 5 components from research, and notes what is emphasized and targeted over time. All components are always at play and important, but certain aspects of the components are highlighted to show what is most critical to assess and really target at different points in time. This is important to point out because comprehensive literacy program also includes using and analyzing a range of assessments to understand the strengths and needs of students. And one of those assessments that we use is called a cadence reading. It was formerly called DIBELS, so we've used that for a number of years. A cadence is an assessment tool that we use to measure basic early literacy skills in the word recognition part of the reading rope, including phonemic awareness and phonics. It's our universal screener for literacy in kindergarten. It helps us to understand the impact of our instruction for all students across components of reading that are priorities for readers over time. At this point in kindergarten, those priorities are phonemic awareness, specifically blending and segmenting, and basic phonics. This is a snapshot of how we're doing with these priorities right now. And actually, the benchmarking period for a cadence just ended last week, and so this data is hot off the press. The beginning of the year data is there. These are composite scores. And you can see that, just to explain the colors, the blue is above benchmark, green is at benchmark level, yellow below, likely to need strategic support in the classroom, and then red is well below, likely to need intensive support. As a quick pulse check, the current on-track percentage by state definition is 85%, so our scores indicated by red are in the off-track and indicating a possible need for intervention. By a slight margin in the middle of the year, so you don't have the full breakdown there, that's just the overview, the composite score, but on all the skills broken down for this middle of the year time, our strongest area district-wide was with the basic phonics piece, where students were applying their beginning decoding skills to nonsense words and sounding those out. How many can they get sounded out in a minute? So, and that's called nonsense word fluency.
So we also wanted to share with you our map reading data, which is our universal screener for grades 1 through 10. If you might recall that we first presented the MAP data last year when we did our presentation on the impact of the pandemic, but at that time we had only had 2 administrations under our belt, so we weren't able to see the full picture. And so what we have here is just the growth from our winter of last year to spring of last year. The blue bars represent our actual growth for our students, and the orange diamonds represented the expected growth for that grade level. One thing I would like to point out, though, is that during the winter administration, only our students in grades K through 6 take it as a universal screener, and those students that take it in grades 7 and 8, and 9 and 10 also, but on this graph we have 7 and 8, are students who were participating in some form of intervention, and we were doing kind of a progress monitoring check for them. So if you would take a look at the chart below, you'd see that we only had 13 7th graders and 15 8th graders that took it during the winter, and so that's why the graph is different for grade 7 and 8. But the bar graph is the visualization of the chart below, so that you could see those numbers, but you can see the growth there as compared nationally is what the orange bar represents. I mean, the orange diamond, excuse me. Again, ours is the blue bar, is where our students fell by grade level. And then I know we shared about this earlier this year, how we had made adjustments to our district goal to align to our performance on MAP, because that data is more actionable. We get it immediately, essentially, once we once we finish the window for that. So I wanted to bring that back up there, and then just to give some more context again to the other two graphs that we have listed there. What you'll see here, what we have is the spring of 2022, our performance, and this does represent K-12 performance of spring 2022 and where our students fell compared to where we are a fall of 2022. And so to give you, again, just a little bit more reference, so MAP breaks down their scores in quintiles very similarly to what you saw with Acadians and the colors. And the way that we have marketed our goal is that we want to move our students to be in the top 3 quintiles, which would be represented by the yellow, green, and the blue in these particular graphs. So in the spring of 2022, we ended with our students, 70% of our students were in those yellow, green, and blue quintiles. After the fall administration, we are now at 72 students that are at the yellow, green, and blue. So we are on track to meet that goal in the spring, but we definitely have much more work that needs to be done. And so, as we mentioned throughout our presentation, we are in a constant state of reflection and on our teaching practices and our assessment practices. It has always been and will always continue to be to what we do to best meet the needs of all of our students that we have. We are working in the district alongside of us, just kind of evaluating our core instruction, what's happening in the classroom, but also taking a look at our MTSS process, which is that system that we use to identify students early based on the data that we get, and then to be able to appropriately match them to interventions. So we're looking at improving that process district-wide and at the building levels. That helps and aligns with all of this work that we're talking about from the core. We've also been able to get back to the robust professional learning that we've been able to do in the past. Again, I know Mrs. Reed was up here and talked about the sub situations that we've had in the past, which did impact our professional development. And so we've been very fortunate that this year we haven't seen it as much, and we really have been able to get teachers back into that learning, which really helps with the shifts that we're seeing, building that understanding and then shifting practice. And that PD it includes the PD that's required through the dyslexia mandate, but it's also in addition to just what we believe is quality PD to keep our teachers doing what they do best. And then finally, we continue to review and update our instructional materials so that they're more diverse and inclusive, and so that they provide better support with the instructional shifts that we are making, like Dr. Schmidt, had mentioned with the decodable text. And again, just taking a look at what are we putting in the hands of our students as they're practicing these skills that are going to be more effective for their overall learning. We are looking at our assessments and the actual intervention programs that we have in place. And we are comparing it to the current research that we have there, as well as the trend data that we're seeing. And it's helping us to have, the deeper discussions so that we are making the best decisions to match students to the appropriate support that they need. And so with that, questions?
Well, I have a question, but does anybody else have a question first? Mrs. Mooring?
When my daughters were in elementary school, there were a lot of parent volunteers in having children read to them or flashcard money. Have we reintroduced volunteer usage in our schools after COVID? I know it kind of went away. I know my mother-in-law would volunteer at High Point. She's not heard from anyone, so I was just curious that when we're asking these children to learn how to decode, if you're just doing it in your head, it may not have the impact that having a human listen to you, and so I was just curious where we are with that.
I believe the volunteer, the way that the volunteers are being invited into the school is happening more at a building level, but I definitely think looking into how we can incorporate that a little bit more into our practices for sure, and working with buildings to be able to set that up. I know outside of the volunteers, again, when we're thinking about just the instructional practices, really diving into that workshop time and how teachers can structure their small groups during that time to be able to be meeting directly with students to be able to do that practice and listen to what they're saying and, you know, kind of hear them processing their reading. So it's not as much independent reading for the student.
And we do have partnerships, grade level set partnerships within workshop, but a lot of our amazing creative teachers are also having buddy reading across grade levels, like they're back to doing that again. And I do know of at least 2 retired educators who have reached out and who are now doing some volunteering in schools, but I think it's definitely something that could be reviewed.
Yeah.
Yep.
Any other questions? I guess I want to start by saying thank you very much for this presentation. I am someone who listened to the podcast, and I've and read all of the articles that came out around the time that that podcast came out. And I know that I've heard from a number of parents, particularly parents, I think, of students who have maybe some special needs, or students who have been in other school districts or other places, just really curious, especially given some of the reporting, some of the stories in the podcast. What does Gahanna do? So I very much appreciate this presentation and the detail in breaking down where we're doing what with regard to balanced literacy and structured. So I guess I have a couple questions. First question is, I know that over the years, things have changed in instruction for educators, right? So we have educators across the spectrum of what they experienced when they were receiving their initial instruction and how to work with students. And I guess one of the things that I think it's wonderful that we're able to now get back to some of the professional development, because I think for some of our educators, I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like there was this period that the focus was really on the balanced literacy. And so some of what we started doing in the district was probably a big change from maybe what they had learned when they were in school. So I guess one of the things I'm wondering is, how has feedback been from staff? Do they feel like they're being adequately supported? Do they feel like they're getting the additional professional development that they need to do something maybe that was really different than what they learned?
Yeah.
And correct
Can I
any
answer it first
assumptions
and
that
then-
I
yeah.
just
Oh,
made that aren't
those are, yeah,
accurate.
those are good.
No,
I
yeah.
think, I think it definitely is going to vary right now, because like everyone, there's so much information that's coming out to people. And so trying to process that while also be in the space where they're educating kids and not feel like they're doing something wrong or, doing something different, like just really trying to process all of that and also take in the learning is a heavy lift, and our teachers are doing an amazing job. I will say that the plan that Dr. Schmidt has put together, and even before, so we're using the state modules that have been released, and those were released a little later than we had anticipated, but that's okay. But there has been professional development since the beginning of the year, and so the plan that's been put in place since then and looking forward into future years is very robust. And I think that I feel like what I have seen with teachers is once they get into that space, they start to, some of that stress, some of it starts to kind of fade a little bit. But Dr. Schmidt is absolutely with them more than I am, so I would like her to speak to the rest of that.
Yeah, I think that, just to piggyback off of that, we are using the state modules, which are a collection of kind of like an online textbook, is how Janelle Bowman, who is our Orton Gillingham trainer in the district, has hosted alongside me. She's given Science of Reading overview in-person presentations, starting with the second half of the year. And for all of our K and 1 teachers, our EL team, our English teachers of English learners, and our reading specialists. So any teachers who work with K and 1 students need to complete 18 hours of the requirement by the start of next school year. So we've had an in-person, and now there's some self-paced work with the modules going on in our schools through the support of principals, scheduling time for them to have time away from students to really dig into the new learning. And then we'll come back again in March and really talk about, I've told them there are going to be some things you listen to and read and hear about in the modules as well as elsewhere that are going to make you say, we had an anchor chart that told us to do that. We had curricular resources that told us to do that. And I said, and now we have curricular resources that are helping us shift our practice. So just to be aware and take in the learning, just like Ms. Holloman said. But the whole first half of the year, we weren't, just waiting for the modules. We were also digging into our updated curricular resources, our reading units, and noticing the shifts in those. And we did that work through an old model that we've had in place for a while, which really came about from the work of teachers, and that's our cohorts. So we have a kindergarten, first grade, and second grade cohort. They're facilitated by coaches and teachers, and we get together and study and learn. And we're not able to go into classrooms right now. We just didn't have enough sub-coverage to spend a lot of time going in and out of classrooms, but really studying the work and supporting each other. So our teachers have been doing that all year, and that's on top of the that foundations timeline, which was a big shift. That's a very different resource, and over time, when we start seeing the results of it, it felt very clunky at first, just because there are a lot of moving parts during a 30-minute session, but we're seeing the benefits and how we can, pull it into the work that our readers and writers do in a less structured way. So that structure really helps us have that foundation to then pull into those other parts of our literacy curriculum. So that's what we mean by balanced literacy plus the structure. Altogether, it's comprehensive and robust.
Okay, so the second question that I have is really about probably parents and guardians, community members. This is different, and for some family members who maybe have multiple kids, it looks really different than maybe some of their experiences with older kids. How has communication been with families? How is that done to set expectations? And maybe you don't have an answer to that because maybe it varies by building. I don't know, but.
So in terms of just what is happening in the classroom, that typically is being taken place through the building communication and the teachers. But as we continue to learn and formalize, our plan connected to the requirements of the dyslexia law, a part of that is also formalizing the communication specifically around that and how to help families understand what the implications are of the law, what the data means when we get the reports, the testing that we're doing, all of that is in development. And so the goal is to have that ready to go for next year once we have to do that big round of testing. But just centered home family letters that kind of explain a little bit about what the assessment was, why it was given, what it was assessing, and then the actual student's report. And we try to do that closely around when they might have an opportunity to meet with the teacher. So like last year, we sent out the reports when it was around parent-teacher conference time so that they could come in and talk a little bit more in depth with the teacher about their report. But, depending on what it is, we always put that in there. If you have more questions, definitely reach out to the classroom teacher or the principal to get more information about what the report is saying about your child. And then I just kind of, again, as we're talking about in general, because like you said, it is different, and we are seeing different needs from our students. And so that takes us back to why we are also refining our MTSS process, because we also know that we have some students that, these gaps or these deficits are going to show up in different ways, and we have to be able to immediately support them so the gaps don't grow larger. So we're working through that process as well.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you again, Ms. Holloman and Dr. Schmidt.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, we are through the director reports and discussions. Are there any additional questions from board members at all before I ask for a motion to go into executive session? Go ahead, Ms. Mrs.
No,
Coates?
no questions, but I just want to thank all of you. I know it takes a lot of time to put together presentations, but it was all very, very informative, and I just really appreciate it, so thank you.
Is there a motion to go into executive session pursuant to revised code 12122 G1 and G5? I think so. G1, the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, compensation of an employee or official, or the investigation of charges or complaints. And then G5, matters required to be confidential by federal law, rules, or state statutes.
So moved.
Thanks, Mrs. Coates. Is there a second? Thank you, Mrs. Horn. Any discussion? Just in case there's anyone watching the live stream, the board will go into executive session. We do have to come back into public session afterward, but the only board action that we'll be taking after executive session is to adjourn the meeting. Mr. Gooding, can you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Coates?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Manley?
Yes.
Mrs. Pickle-Antonio?
Yes.
Mrs. Mooring?
Yes.
Motion carried.
It is 8:11 p.m. We'll probably take just a couple minute recess and then go into executive session.